Hello. Today we'll be taking a look at connecting your on-premise network up into Azure. So to get started, you will need a Windows Server operating system, virtual machine, or physical system that can be running Windows Server 2012 R2, 2016, or 2019. We will be using Windows Server 2019 for this example. Other options could be you could use a physical hardware device such as this Cisco, Juniper, or whatever vendor you have that supports site-to-site VPN. Since I don't have that hardware, I will be leveraging a software solution and using Windows Server 2019. In addition, you will need obviously Azure subscription in order to deploy resources in Azure to connect. Otherwise, if you don't have an Azure subscription, you don't have any Azure resources, then you wouldn't need an Azure VPN. So let's go ahead and start by deploying a new Windows Server 2019 virtual machine, and let's go ahead and get started. So we're just going to be setting up and installing our Windows Server 2019. So I've already mounted my ISO, I've created a new virtual machine, and now we're booting off the ISO. So if you've installed Windows Server or really any Windows Server 2012 R2 or above, this setup process is pretty much identical. So here we're just on the setup screen. We're going to say next and install now. So that'll just go ahead and go through loading a few files. So here, if you have a product key, you can go ahead and key that in now so it can activate Windows. If you don't, you can click the I don't have a product key down at the bottom. And here you can go ahead and select what type of Windows Server you want to install, desktop experience or the core version. Standard or data center doesn't really matter. I'm going to go with data center and go next. And go ahead and read the licensing terms and then click I accept and click next. In here you want to go ahead and say custom since this is a fresh install, and then I'm just going to go ahead and allow it to format and use the whole disk and partition it and format it any way it wants. And then it will just go ahead and go through the installation. So this will take a few minutes, so I won't bore you with the entire installation. But yeah, to go through and copy some files over, install some features, install some updates, and it'll go through that whole process. So it will just take a few minutes for that to go through. So after you reboot the first time, you need to provide password for your administrator account to log in. Go ahead and select that, click finish. Booting up for the first time. So here we are on our Windows Server 2019 desktop. So this is after the first boot. So the first thing you probably want to do after you deployed your Windows Server 2019 virtual machine, or as I mentioned, 2012 R2 or 2016, they all have the required capabilities. I'm just using 2019 for this example. But once you have this up and running, one of the first things you may want to do is you're going to have a random name here. So you may want to give the computer a unique name that makes sense for your particular environment. There's no requirements or dependency for you to actually join a domain. So in my case, I'm not going to join my system to the domain either. And since this system will be exposed out to the public internet, it may be a good idea. You may not want to have remote desktop enabled because that kind of make you kind of a big red target for someone to do an port scan to maybe look at your system a little bit more deeper to try to see can they hack their way in, or just try random passwords and things against your system. So I'm going to leave remote desktop disabled on this system. And then I'm just going to go ahead and give this system a name. So do that. Where it says computer name, you can just simply click on the computer name. And then on this screen here, so under the computer name tab, you can give the computer name a description if you want. So I'm going to say, I'm going to give it a name here. What's a good name here? So I'll just say virtual. Let's give it a name. Virtual router. Okay. And then on the screen, I'll just go ahead and click change. And then I need to give it a name. So I'm just gonna give it that name there. Say OK. And then you will be prompted to reboot for that name to take effect. So we'll just go ahead and allow that to reboot and then pick right back up. Once you've rebooted your server, now it's time you want to add a few additional roles and features to the system to accommodate routing and VPN roles that you're going to need. So we're going to go ahead and click Add Roles and Features. And we're just going to next through this first screen. And then on the second screen, you're going to click Role-Based or Feature-Based Installation and click Next again. And then we're just going to click Next again on this screen. And then on this screen here, we want to scroll down and select the Remote Access option. And then click Next. And Next again. And then now let's bring you to like the remote access kind of wizard setup type of thing where you go and select the features you actually want. So we'll go ahead and click Next again. So in here we're going to need the routing capability. And then once we select routing, it selects a whole slew of other options for you. So go ahead and say Add Features so it adds all those additional requirements. And you see there it also selects direct access and VPN as well once I click routing. So go ahead and select Next. And then you just kind of now get to the web server role configuration piece. So just go ahead and next through all of these answers here. You don't need to click or check anything additional. And then click Install. So that'll take a few moments to install all of those. So after the roles are successfully installed, you'll get a message telling you configuration is required. So you can click the Open Getting Started wizard, and that'll give you a nice little interface to configure everything. So let's go ahead and click that. And this is not my preference, but I'll just click this just so you can see it, what it looks like. So did that do anything? Might be loading up in the back. So after the wizard starts, you get a couple options. So deploy both direct access and VPN. So really on this side, I don't really want anything to do with direct access. I really just want VPN. So so we have deploy both direct access and VPN, deploy direct access only, or deploy VPN. So I'm going to go with the deploy VPN only option. And once you click that, that kicks you over to like the legacy routing and remote access feature. So once you're in here, you see right now the service is not running. So what you need to do is go ahead and right click on it and configure and enable routing and remote access. And you get presented with this wizard. So just go ahead and next to this first option. So you get a lot of different options here. So remote access, dial-up or VPN. If you want to do NAT, VPN in NAT, secure connection between two private networks, and then you also could do a custom configuration. So in my case, I kind of, let's go with the first option that is given us here. I'll just go next. And, it's really not that. So let's go back. Don't want that. The second option or third option, let's see what this one gives us. So it's saying less than 2 network adapters are on the system. So don't want to do that. Oh, so that reminds me. So one thing you do need is 2 network adapters. I thought I had added one on the system, so I'll need to add an additional one for that. So what you want 1 network adapter that's connected to your internet, whatever your internet connection is backing up. Then you want one that's connected to your internal network. is what you would need. Since I'm getting these messages, I'm just going to go ahead and go with the custom configuration. Go next. And then on the custom configuration, I'm going to enable VPN access, NAT, and LAN routing. So you may not need all of these. So I will use NAT to allow my systems that will be leveraging this system as a default gateway to get to Azure. I also will have them use the system to get to the actual internet. So instead of being behind my regular router, they will actually be behind this virtual machine running routing services now, once everything is all said and done. So I'll go ahead and click next and then finish. So that'll go ahead and enable those roles on the routing, and then it'll also give me a prompt to go ahead and start the service up. So I'll go ahead and say start service. All right, so now those services are running. So if I go to network interfaces, I can see that I now do have those two network adapters. So Ethernet, Ethernet 2. It's normally a good idea to maybe rename them so you have kind of a useful friendly name so you can easily distinguish between them. So I probably will name one of mine internal and then name one of the other ones internet. Or maybe public, and yeah, I will name it public internal and then I'll name one internet, just so I can easily distinguish between them. So on the port side, you see it has set up a whole multitude of VPN ports that are available for me to use. Right, so that means I could have multiple VPN connections going out to various different Azure virtual networks or virtual network gateways that I may have stationed in different regions and things like that. In this case, I'm just going to be connecting to a single region, to a single virtual network. But like I say, you can have this to leverage it to multiple different locations. Then other things here, if I go to IPv4, I can kind of see the IPv4 capabilities that are there. So we have the general, go to general, that just show me my general connections and things like that. So you can see I have, again, I can see those two different networks. So my Ethernet one, that is my public facing, and then I have Ethernet 2, which is my internet facing connection. Have static routes. So we'll talk about some of this later. So as we have various different connectivity up to Azure and to the virtual network gateway there, we can define what routes this local router should use for different subnets. So say for example, if I had a subnet and Azure, I don't know, East US, I may have a certain range of IP addresses that are in East US, and I may have a specific gateway that is in East US. So I would associate that subnet range with that particular gateway connection. And then say if I had some in West US, I would associate that subnet range with that particular gateway connection. So other things here is, as I enabled the NAT capability. So on the NAT capabilities here, I would need to go ahead and associate my NAT connections with my internet facing and my public facing, so it can distinguish between those two. And then that'll allow, again, it'll allow my systems internally that will be leveraging this router for internet access to send their internet traffic to this router and then get out to the real public internet, as well as if there's a connection that's being directed toward Azure, it'll also route that toward Azure across the VPN connection instead of having to go out to the public unencrypted internet to get to those resources. So that's about it for this initial, just kind of getting your VM ready. So this VM is kind of ready to go. I don't have the connectivity information yet, since I haven't spent up like my gateway or subnets or any of that stuff on the Azure side. So that will be the kind of the next things that's required after you have your actual virtual machine up and running on your on-premise. And again, it can be physical. I'm just using virtual machine; those are easier for me to spin up. So let's go ahead and hop over to Azure. So here I am, I'm over on the Azure Portal. So on the Azure Portal, what you want to do is, so when you log in, you may see something different than this. I'm just on the main home page for my subscription. But once you're here, over here on the far left hand side, you're going to go and click on All Services. And then under All Services, you want to go ahead and look for Virtual Networks. So once you type that in, it'll go ahead and filter to it. So you'll see two options that says Virtual Networks and then Virtual Networks Classic. You want to use the Virtual Network side. So don't select the Classic. So the Classic is for deploying the older ASM model for Azure templates. So the one that just says Virtual Networks, that'll use the modern latest ARM model for deploying virtual networks. So definitely pick the virtual network side. And then you can click this little box here. So if you click the star, that'll go ahead and pin that to the left hand side here so you don't have to search for it again. It'll just be there as an option. So once you go into virtual networks, so you see on mine, I see several different virtual networks that are already created. What we'll do, we'll create a new one and not use any of these that are already here. So because these are already set up, they actually already have a virtual network gateway, so that won't be too interesting to demo on one if it's already fully set up. So I'm going to go ahead and just click Add. And then here I need to give it a name, so I'm going to name it LTD Azure Lab /test. Let's name it Test Network. All right. And then here I need to specify IP address space. So I could just use the one that is giving me there by default, or I can go and be more specific and pick whatever my IP address name that I want to leverage for this. Or again, if you already have existing virtual network, that already has like virtual machines and things like that in it, we can possibly leverage that, assuming that you haven't used all of the available address space and there's enough available where we can carve out a piece for our virtual network gateway to use. So in this case, I'm going to use, let's see, 10.0. I don't know, let's do .30.0. And then when you just use a /24 subnet. So you can see that gives me 256 addresses for that subnet. And then I need to specify a resource group that it needs to live in. So I'll just go in and select one of my existing resource groups there. Then I need to specify the location where I want this virtual network to live. So what region in Azure do I want that to live? So we have a lot of different choices. So if you're in the US, probably makes a good idea to deploy somewhere in the US. If you're in Canada, deploy somewhere in Canada, just so that network is somewhere close to where you physically are, so you can kind of have a better latency response when you're actually connecting up into it. Since I'm in the US, I'll go ahead and select, I'll just leave it on that north central location that was already highlighted. And then for the subnet, I need to give it a name, right? So by default, it gives me a name of default. And also by default, it will take all of the IP addresses, right? So if I were to do this and say, okay, my address space is 10.0.30.0/24 subnet, and my first default subnet is 10.0.30.0/24. That means that would take, this default subnet would take all of the available address space in this particular virtual network. And if you do that, you actually won't be able to deploy a default, not a default, but you won't be able to deploy a virtual network gateway into this VNet. So instead, what you need to do, you need to make this a smaller range so you can separate it out where you'll have multiple subnets within the VNet. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this initial default subnet be a /25. So that'll give me 128 addresses available. So if I want to deploy virtual machines into this VNet, and then have my on-premise talk to these systems. Once I deploy my gateway also into this VNet, I would have 128 available IP addresses that I can use for my virtual machines. Well, it'll be a little bit less than that that'll actually be usable, but that's kind of the idea behind this. So I'm splitting the subnet, or splitting the address space into multiple subnets. All right, and then you have options for selecting if you want to enable DDoS protection. So all of the VNets gets kind of some basic DDoS protection, and then if you want more enhanced, you can go to the standard on that. So I don't currently have a DDoS protection plan available. I don't pay for that in my subscription, but if you needed that additional capability, you can actually turn that on. So say, for example, you're hosting some virtual machines that are hosting, like, say, some popular website or something like that, and some bad actor out on the web starts attacking you with a whole lot of bad malicious traffic. This DDoS protection will help protect you against that. But that's a whole nother topic that's totally separate from what we're talking about here. Just kind of want to mention that. So I'm going to just leave that at basic. And then you have some other options here. Is that, so some capabilities you can do, you can actually enable different service endpoints, so various different services that are available in Azure, to actually, instead of you accessing those services across a public IP address, you can associate those services with a internal IP address that's part of your VNet that you've defined, and then you can access those services through that VNet subnet that you've defined. So not all services are supported, but these are some of the ones that are there. Again, this is not something that's it's kind of out of scope for what we're talking about here, so we won't do that. And then also you have the firewall capability, and again, that's out of scope of what we're doing here, so I'll just leave all those disabled. And look, we're in pretty good shape here, so I'll go ahead and click create. It'll go through and verify that everything looks good with the options that I selected. And then if it passed validation, it'll go ahead and start deploying that out to the resource group that I specified. So typically this doesn't really take very much time for it to complete. So you see there, so mine just completed, just took a couple seconds there for it to do it. So if I go ahead and refresh here, I now have this new Azure Lab Test Network VNet running. And running in North Central US. I can see the address space, and then by default it's going to use Azure provided DNS services. So if I go ahead and click on that, kind of see some details about my new VNet. And so here we can see the address space again, that 10.0.30.0 with a /24. You can see if there's any connected devices. So since we just created that, obviously there's nothing connected to it. You can see the subnets that's defined, and this is actually where we want to go to continue our setup. So if you recall, we initially made that default subnet that was a /25. So you can see here, so that /25 actually has 128 addresses total, but only 123 of those will be available for me to assign to like different virtual machines and resources within my network. All right, so if you look here at the top, you have option to add another subnet, or add a gateway subnet, right? So in the case if this option is grayed out, or if you've already used all of your IP addresses in your existing virtual network, you won't be able to do this. And as far as these gateway subnets, they do have to be named very specifically. So when you do it through this way, it will enforce that. So let's go ahead and walk through that process now. I go ahead and click gateway subnet. It automatically kind of picks some things for me based on the IP address range that I have. So you can see here, it gave it a name, gateway subnet, so it has to be named that. If you created one manually, you name it anything other than that, it won't work. So it has to be given that name exactly like that. And then, so in the address space, if you hover over here, it kind of gives you some information here that, okay, it can be /24 or whatever. So you see here, it gave me a /28 by default, and that's okay for me. So that'll give me 11 usable IP addresses, and then 5 that will be reserved in that space. So that'll allow me, again, up to 11 devices or a single device with 11 different IP addresses that can exist in this gateway subnet. And then here you can specify a route table. If you have that, I don't have anything there, so I'm just say none. And then again, you have those service subnet capabilities, so I don't want to do any of that at this point. And then also some other things, subnet delegation. So again, if you want to delegate a particular subnet to a particular Azure service, so you don't have to go with the public internet with public IPs to reach that, you can do that. But again, we're not doing any of that here. So I'll just take those default settings and go ahead and say OK. That'll, again, it'll go and validate that those options looks OK, and then it'll create that subnet for me. And so that is now all ready to go. So I have my test network. I have some default address space that I can use for my virtual machines, and then I also have some address space that will be designated for my gateway. So now that we have those pieces in place, the next thing we need to do, we actually need to create a virtual network gateway. So let's go ahead and do that now. So back on my home page, I want to now create my virtual network gateway. So here I'm going to go to all services again, and then I'm just going to go ahead and search for virtual network gateway. So that'll go ahead and filter down. So in my case, there's only one choice. And again, if you want to pin that so you don't have to search for it the next time, you can go ahead and click the star to pin it to the left side of the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and go to virtual network. So once I go in there in virtual network gateway, you can see I already have one virtual network gateway already deployed, but now I want to create a new one for a different environment. So I'm going to go ahead and say add. And then here you have this wizard that comes up. So a lot of different options here. So the first option, you kind of pick your subscription that it needs to go to, and then you need to give it a name. So I'm going to kind of use this similar name that I've been using. So you can kind of name this whatever you want. So this one is going, it will be going in Indiana. So I'll just name it LTV Azure Lab dash Indiana / ENG2 or 1. Yeah, whatever you want to name it, doesn't really matter. Let's just use that as the name. Well, actually, let's stay with the testing. Will be Indiana, but let's stay with the testing, for example. So test-VNG1. Then I need to select a region. So again, you kind of want to make this as close as you can to where it physically is, right? So because we want to have a lower latency if we can. So say, for example, you're in the US, you may not want to have your virtual network gateway have you connecting all the way in, I don't know, West India, right? That's going to have a really long latency round trip if you do something like that. So in my case, as I mentioned, this will be in not India, but in Indiana. May want to do something maybe like Central US or again, North Central US is relatively close to that area. So that may be my best option from like a latency perspective. So I'm going to go with that, stay with that same thing with North Central US. And then for gateway type, we're going to do VPN. So you see, you have an option for express route. So express route, that's a totally separate thing. Again, separate from what we're going to be talking about here. But just for FYI, express route is like a dedicated circuit that you're going to get from a provider of some type that will connect your on-premise directly up into Azure without going across the public internet at all. So when you use the VPN option, we are going across the public internet, but we're going across an encrypted channel so that traffic that's passing from your on-premise to Azure is secured. All right. So the next thing, you have an option for VPN types, route-based versus policy-based. I will be using a route-based one. So if you hover over here, it gives you a little bit, well, let's try it again. If you hover over the I for information, give you some details on route-based. So choose a route-based gateway if you intend to use points of site. into virtual network or multiple site-to-site connections. So in my case, I'm essentially will be creating a site-to-site connection, but you also could leverage this for a point-to-site connection as well. Or so yeah. All right. So let's move on. So now you have to click or create or select a SKU as far as what type of VPN performance levels you're going to need. You can go to the learn more to find out more details on the differences and the limits for basic, standard, and high performance. If you do I'm going to just leverage the basic. There is obviously a cost difference when you use the various different ones, and there is also some availability enhancements, I believe, with the higher SKU tiers, where they may be deployed in an active type of scenario, right? So in the case of one of those that's in Azure goes offline or need to be patched or whatever it is, you have no direct access to it, but the service will manage that failover and things for you to kind of keep you connected. And then again, there's some bandwidth limit differences between these as well. But I'm just going to go with the basic. And then on the virtual network, this is where we'll go and say, okay, what virtual network do we want the virtual network gateway to live in? So we pre-created that test network, so we're going to just go ahead and put it in that same test network. And then when I do that, it goes and finds that gateway subnet, right, that we define. So you see it actually has the range for that gateway subnet we define, and not that default gateway or default subnet that we define that had the bigger range of IP addresses. It knows it picks that specific one. All right, and then we need a public IP address because virtual network gateway needs to expose the IP address out to the public internet, that from your on-premise using your public IP address, you can go and connect to that. So I'm going to go ahead and let it create a new, then I need to give it a name. So that's what I'm going to name it. And then dynamic versus static assignment. So I see that's grayed out. So that may be a remnant of me using a basic one. I'm not sure. Maybe that's just how the basic one works. I don't remember. And then you have option to do like active model, as I mentioned. So when you hover over here, in order to do that active scenario where you actually get two gateways up running in Azure that can kind of fail over or support more load for you by having two of them there as opposed to one. It has to be those other SKUs. It looks like the basic does not support that. And then if you're kind of a more advanced true enterprise, right, you may have some BGP ASN that you advertise out. And from that, you can kind of learn different routes and have the virtual network gateway learn those routes as well, so it can kind of route in between your on-premise and Azure, and from Azure back into on-premise if you need that. In this case, again, I don't have BGP, and in fact, the Windows Server 2019 that we're using, or at least the capability that I'm using in this case, I don't believe that capability supports BGP at all. I think it only supports things like RIP, and I know it supports RIP. It may be a couple other routing protocols that it supports, but I don't think BGP is one of those. Could be wrong, but I know some other network virtualization pieces of Windows Server 2019 does support BGP, but well, might support BGP. Don't quote me on any of that. I'm not a networking person, but I think some of those other advanced network capabilities in there may support that, but the routing and remote access services that we're leveraging here does not support that as far as I know. All right, so look like we're good here. So we're going to go next. So here we have capabilities where we can tag this. So these services can, or these resources that I'm spinning up in Azure, I can kind of track them and kind of find them easier, or maybe use these tags for charge back to the business or a certain business area. So say if I'm spinning up this area or this virtual network gateway for, I don't know, for finance. Maybe finance wanted to put some application up in Azure. right? I can kind of tag this with, say, I don't know, department, with a department flag, and name it finance. So when the bills come, I can go and do a query and say, hey, show me everything that's tagged with department finance, and then I can use that to say, okay, hey finance, this was the cost for this month for the resources you have up in Azure. All right, but these key name value pairs, you can type whatever you want there. So I'll leave that there as an example, department finance. You just go, so next. And then it goes do a validation on everything that I've selected and make sure that those settings are compatible with each other. And then also that, like say, if I had other policies and things in place on my subscription, and make sure that I'm not violating any of those if it's intended for those to be blocked. So look like everything checked out okay here for mine, and I'm just gonna go create. So the deployment of this will take some time. I'll probably give it maybe, I don't know, 30 minutes or so possibly. It's gonna definitely take quite a bit of time before it completes. So at this point, you can probably go, I don't know, grab a cup of coffee, drink that cup of coffee, and then wait some more, check some emails. Just yeah, go do something else for a little while, and then check back in, and it should be done. But we'll wait for this to come back up, and then we'll continue. Okay, now that completed, it took about 36 minutes in my case for it to fully deploy my virtual network gateway. So once that's deployed, we'll just go ahead and jump over to the virtual network gateway section. And here we go. I see my new virtual network gateway up in Azure. It's a gateway type of VPN, and it is in North Central US. So I'll go ahead and click into it. So once I click into it, I see some information about my gateway. So I can see, like I mentioned, the location where it is. I can see that it's a VPN. I can see the SKU. I can see the VPN type, in this case route based. I can see what virtual network is associated with. And then also I can see the public IP address that's been assigned to it. All right, and then down here at the bottom, there's various different metrics associated with it, like ingress, egress, traffic that's going into it. So currently, since there's nothing connected to it, there's no traffic flowing in or out of it. I go over to configuration. Again, just kind of see that basic information that we just talked about. So in this, again, the SKU, then standard or high performance, kind of other SKUs you can switch to. And then connections. So there's currently no connections going into or out of this particular gateway. And then if there's any point to site configurations associated with it, again, that will be displayed here. So that's currently have not been configured. So now what we need to do, we need to configure something what is named a local network gateway within Azure. And essentially what that is just telling Azure about our on-premise environment, what subnets it contains, and then also what IP address we will be coming from. So let's jump back over to all services again, and this time let's look for a local network gateway. And similarly, like the other ones, you do probably want to just go ahead and click the star so you can pin that to the side so you don't have to search for it again. So I'm going to go ahead and click on local network gateway. And then once we're here, it will show us some whatever we have. So again, I already have one defined, so I want to create a new one. I'll just go ahead and click add. And I'll use LTB Azure Lab /test/LNG1. Well, I think I was using LNG1. That sounds good. And then here's where I put the public IP address that I will be coming from. So whatever IP address is exposed on my virtual machine, that's the IP address that I need to type in here. So I'll just put I'll just put that in for now. That's not really my address, but I'll just so I can just have a placeholder. And then for address space, this is where you define your internal IP address space. So if you're using like a 192.168 address or 172. Whatever your subnet address space, that's where you'll type that in here. So say if my IP address was 192.168.0.1 and the /24 subnet, if say there was one of the oh wait, I typed that wrong. 0/24. Say if that was a subnet on my on-premise or one of my subnets, that's where I would put that in. And say if I also had a 192.168.0. 1.0/24. Maybe I have both of those IP address range exists on that on-premise network. I would specify that here. And again, if you had some type of device or software router or whatever you had that supported BGP, this is where you can configure that. That way you don't have to necessarily define every single address space that you may have, where the BGP routing will kind of figure that out based on what routes you're advertising. But again, I'm not a networking person, so don't read too much into what I say on as far as BGP. So I don't have a whole lot of experience with it, but so I won't be using BGP in this case. All right, so the next part, we need to just specify a resource group that we'll be using. So again, I'm just going to use my LTB Azure Lab resource group, and then also again a location for where that was, and then you'll just simply click create, and it'll go out and create that for you. So that'll normally just take a few seconds for that to create. So after that's created, you can go ahead and refresh the screen here, and then whatever you created should show up in the list here. So I'll go ahead and click into that. And then again, I get an overview of that particular thing that I just created. And then over here on the right, I can see again what location it's deployed in, and I can see what IP address I associated with it, as well as what address space I associated with it in the subnet mask associated with it. All right, so that's all good and handy. And then I can go over to configuration again. I can see again what those values that I've defined are, or modify them. And then I could also see connections. So if this local network gateway is being currently used with a particular virtual network gateway, I'll be able to see that connection here. So you can either add connection from this side or from the virtual network gateway side. So let's try it from this side. If I hit add here, I need to give it a name. So I'll do sounds like a very long name, but it validates. So in this case, we're doing a site-to-site IPsec connection. I need to go and select the virtual network gateway that I will be using this local network gateway with. So I go ahead and click this, and I'll go ahead and select my test virtual network gateway. And then here I need to do a shared key. So this is a unique key that you don't want to share with others, right? So you're going to use this key to talk between your on-premise router and the Azure Virtual Network Gateway is what you're going to be doing. So you're going to want to have a strong, secure key that you use here, and to establish that connection between the two. And you'll need this key later for when you set up your Windows Server 2019 connection up to the Virtual Network Gateway. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a password. So yeah, I'm going to use password 1. That's super secure. No one will ever guess that. So and go ahead and say OK. And again, that'll take should take just a couple seconds for that to go ahead and create that. Normally doesn't take too long. for that connection to be created. So now, if I let's hop back to overview, hop back to connection again, it still shows nothing here. So I may have to refresh the page to reflect that so you actually see it. Right? So now I see that, okay, this local network gateway connection has association with my test virtual network gateway, but the current status is unknown, right? So it's not actually connected. I just set up Azure to be able to accept that connection. It's all like done up to this point. So we'll jump back over on the virtual network gateway section. And we'll go back into our test virtual network gateway. And then we go to connections, and we see that same association here. It's just going the other way. So we see, okay, we have a connection coming from this local network gateway connection. I'm going into this virtual network gateway, or this local network gateway going into this virtual network gateway. Terminology gets kind of confusing a little bit. They sound very similar. But again, the status is unknown because that connection hasn't actually been established yet. So now what we need to do, since we've kind of put in the plumbing on the Azure side to accept that connection, now we need to go back to our virtual machine, Windows Server 2019, and actually establish that connection, or attempt to establish that connection. So let's go ahead and do that now. So now we're back over on the 2019 virtual machine. So I'm just sitting here on the Server Manager dashboard. So I'm going to go over to Tools, and I'm going to launch the Routing and Remote Access. All right, so now over in the Routing and Remote Access, we actually want to create a new connection. So I'm going to go over to Network Interfaces and go right click, and we're going to do a new demand DAO interface. So in here, we're just going to say next. We're going to give it a name. So I'm going to say connection to Azure TV. I could type. Oh. I think that's what I name it. Something like that. You get the idea. So you can type whatever you want there. And we will be connecting using a virtual private networking. So say next. So here, I believe you have a couple different options, but if you leave it on automatic selection, it may be able to figure it out. But I believe the site-to-site connection uses this IKEv2, I believe. But let's try that first. So we're going to go next, and then it's going to ask for the host name or IP address associated with your virtual network gateway. So that's what you need to type in here. So back in the Azure Portal, when you provisioned your virtual network gateway, a public IP address would have been assigned to that. So that's what you need to put here in this section. So you just want to go ahead and type in your IP address there. So I'll put mine there. Go next. And I'll just leave that at the default route IP packets on this interface. Say next. And here you define the IP address space that you're trying to get to in Azure. So I'm trying to remember what IP address space I used. I think I used 10.0.30 for my network, so I'm going to just go ahead and put that in. Alright. Oh, I need to put a metric. I'll just do 100. Alright, so that's one of the, so what that's pretty much what that's saying. Anytime my system needs to get to this network, it will try to leverage this VPN connection to access that subnet. Next. And dial-out credentials, I don't have any credentials, so I'm just going to say next through that and then say finish. And now I want to go back in here again, go to the properties, and I'm trying to remember where it is in here. So under the security tab, you see by default it's selected use machine certificates. So that's not how we're authenticating here. We're actually going to use a pre-shared key. So if you recall, we specified a pre-shared key on the local network gateway when that was created. So that's what we need to specify here. Whatever our pre-shared key is. So I think I had used password 1. So that's what whatever you use for yours, your super secret secure password, you'll need to place that there. So now that you have your password in, if everything is when it's planned, you should be able to connect now. So let's go ahead and try to connect. So that'll go and try to connect up to the service. So one thing to keep in mind is that, so now I am successfully connected, right? You see I'm successfully connected up to Azure from my on-premise, leveraging this Windows Server 2019 virtual machine that is acting as a router to get to any Azure services that I have deployed in that 10.0.30.0 subnet. Depending on your particular ISP and your particular router and things like that, you may have to do a little additional steps on the router itself. So in some cases, you may have to expose the virtual machine to be in your DMZ zone on your router. So all of the traffic that's inbound will then hit this particular VM first if you don't have any other port forwarding rules or anything like that configured. That's just something to keep in mind. It may or may not be something you need to do. It just depends on your particular circumstances. And now at this point, for all intents and purposes, I have established a VPN connection, and it's actually usable now. So now for virtual machines that are on premise, for example, if you don't have a router that can kind of if you have like a router or a switch where you can put in static routes to say, hey switch or hey router, anytime you need to go to 10.0.30.0, actually route that to the IP address of this particular virtual machine. That's what you would have to do. Alternative would be, since my particular router doesn't have that capability, what I'm doing, I'm using I'm using this virtual machine as the router. So when I say I spin up a new virtual machine in my environment, it'll get a DHCP address on my network, or I may assign a static IP address to it. Then what I do, I go in and adjust the default gateway on the virtual machine to actually point to the IP address of this virtual machine. That way it routes all this traffic through here, and then in the case where it needs to actually get up to Azure, it'll use that VPN tunnel that we have established to get out there. Hopefully this has been useful, and I will see you in the next one, because so the other thing you may have to keep in mind is that if you have other firewall rules and things like that on your subnets and VNets, you may not be able to like ping things from your on-premise up into Azure. So you may have to adjust your firewall rules to accommodate that, or same thing for like RDP or whatever type of traffic is passing between the two. But at this point, like I said, the tunnel is established, and we can talk back and forth. So in my case right now, this particular that network doesn't have anything in it, so we'll be deploying some virtual machines into that subnet, and then we'll just actually do like a ping test to just verify that we do have successful routing back and forth. See you next time.